There is talk that a guy who's talking so much about Sanatan Dharma should not resort to such words. Point remains that he just opened up in a show which apparently was meant for roasting. Why did it become such a big issue? I still can't place my finger on. I don't understand why things went from LOL to FIR in seconds. What did he say that as a nation we haven't been saying for centuries? Why did CMs of states step in? Why was there news of parliamentary committees being proposed to study this? And why was YouTube asked to take down that stuff? I mean, what happened really, right? You've heard those expressions from cricketers. Why did CEOs, public figures who are roasting beer biceps, Ranveer Allahabadia now, for these words not come up and say, I do not want to watch that game because that bugger is playing out in that game and he used these invectives. The question is, did he violate something? I'm not sure.
But if you say something about somebody else's parents, then the public will not forgive you, saying, how dare you say something about somebody else's parents?
I call these guys hypocrites. I'm sorry. I call these guys hypocrites.
How do you define this Lakshman Rekha?
There really is no Lakshman Rekha.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Business Networking with Vipul Bondal on Thinkly Talks. Today is Monday, the 17th of February, 2025, and this is a special from our regular podcasts, which are on Wednesdays, because the topic is such, and the person sitting with me is also such that we had to do something unusual. So the topic, as you all know, is freedom of speech. And to talk about freedom of speech, here is somebody who is passionate about freedom of speech. He calls himself a keen advocate of the concept of freedom of speech. And he is also clear that freedom of speech comes with loads of responsibility towards audiences. Welcome, Sanjeev Sarma. He is the principal CEO of Content Monks and is a seasoned communications specialist and content writer. With over 30 years experience spanning journalism, copywriting, content writing, and ghostwriting. He currently works on enabling businesses and brands with content and CEOs with personal branding journeys through ghost authoring. Welcome, Sanjeev.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mr. Vipul Bondal. Thank you also to Team Thinkly. It's a pleasure being here, and it's a pleasure talking about something that I hold very dear, the concept of freedom of speech or expression. Thank you so much for this.
Okay, so Sanjeev, let's get into the topic right away. Every few days we hear something or the other about freedom of speech or lack of it. Every time somebody is trolled, every time somebody says something controversial, this topic comes up, and people who don't know what it means really, are always confused. So I just thought I'll pose you the question: what is this thing called freedom of expression or freedom of speech? Can you begin with, let's say, the legal or the dictionary meaning of it, and then what it means in reality?
Okay. So let me right at the onset, let me break this mold and not go the legal way. Right. That's pretty boring. Let me talk about freedom of expression now. Legalese. I'm not a legal guy, so I will not step into legalese. I will not delve into legalese. But I have my own thought journeys that I have worked out in this. So for me, freedom of expression or speech exists as various multiverses. All right. And in each multiverse, it's a different animal. In the personal multiverse, freedom of speech is like a tiger, is this primordial expression of self. And the right to that expression and the right to say, this is what I think, this is what makes me right? It translates to very clearly, and that is what we will move into when we delve into the legalese part. It says, I shall say what I want to about anything that takes my fancy to anyone and every time, anytime or every time. Right. So this is very simply put what it is in the personal multiverse. The second multiverse is what I call the legal and the constitutional multiverse. The first one was a roaring tiger, right? So this one is a dog on the leash. And in this multiverse, the owner decides that every dog can have its day and its say and its run so long as boundaries are maintained. In other words, you can't get beyond the leash. If you go beyond the leash, I will choke you. Is the best way to describe this from a legalese framework. Right? And this is why I didn't actually get down to that legal kind of journey. The third most interesting one is a political multiverse. And I do not talk about politics in terms of, politics per se. It's the interchange of expressions, the power plays that happens between people and so on. It's about figuring out the easiest way to get offended and market that offense to drum up support from people who you know are going to respond to that offense. Call it offense marketing. Largely speaking, the concept of freedom of speech is a quagmire. It is not definitive or quantifiable, really. To quote one of my mentors from the world of journalism, freedom of speech is like a cow gully. Everyone can offer what they want, spice, salt, sweet, whatever, right? As long as the consumer is the right one for the stall and does not get indigestion. So finally, the story here that it's not about what you serve, it's about who tastes it and what it feels like for them.
Okay, so freedom of speech really you mean is about who tastes it and what what it means to them, rather than who's serving it, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
these days we find people taking offense at the smallest.
Yeah.
And people get offended very easily than what used to happen maybe around the time you and me started our career. People get offended by lyrics that are played on in a song, and people get offended by what people say on television. People get offended by what people say on the playground. So everything is causing an offense these days. So it's a difficult thing to understand, and thanks for breaking it down for us. I mean, as somebody who's in the field of communication, or somebody who guides, other people in what they should say or behave or express themselves. Do you think there are any rights and responsibilities that come with freedom of expression? I mean, especially responsibility.
Okay. I will start by saying that we are in a happy space right now. Right? People getting offended is a beautiful thing to happen because the offense is the potpourri of everything that gets mixed, right? And offense is what leads to a realization of larger journeys ahead. It leads to evolution in certain ways. So I'm very
Okay.
happy about people getting offended. It is not a bad thing to happen. It's not a wrong thing to happen. People who offend and people who get offended, they are this infinite circle that goes round and round. And it is very necessary for expression to proceed and to move ahead with the world. So
Okay.
offending and taking offense both are happy journeys.
Can
Coming
you
back to
explain that with an example so that it's easier for us to understand what you say?
right, let me put it this way, right? There are paradigms that are part of a culture, right? We grew up in various religions, various cultures, various civilizations.
All right.
We question those tenets, right? They are offensive to some, they are not offensive to some, right? But are we offending? We are just asking a question. So in that question, which is offensive to some, we get responses, we get retorts, we get those journeys, and that leads to continuous debate and evolution. So offending is a part of actually provoking a thought process in somebody and provoking a difference of opinion in somebody, saying, hey, why can't this person think like this? Why can't I think like this? I think it's a happy journey to have, if that's a good example.
Okay. So are you trying to say that if you offend, let's say offend, I mean, I don't mean when you're trying to insult somebody, but you offend somebody's sensibilities or their thinking, but can you do it maybe as a matter of the process of expressing, or as a strategy, if I were to look at it differently?
Yes, it can happen naturally. It can happen as a strategy. Both journeys are possible. At any given point of time, right? If there are 12 signs of the zodiac, there are 12 different people I have offended by whatever I say, including this conversation. So let us not get into what an offense constitutes. We will delve into that in some time. But largely, I'm saying that whatever we say is offensive. Whatever we say, somebody can get offended by. And I think it's a happy state of affairs. People getting offended by it does not tell me that people are going haywire. It just tells me that they're getting a lot more sensitive and a lot more aware and a lot more, they're getting around to thinking about what things mean for them, for the universe. So getting offended and offending are both an inimical part of a journey of evolution, right? So yeah, so I would like to talk about rights and responsibilities again in terms of food and say there is no free lunch, right? The same goes for freedoms of speech. Rights and responsibilities for me are covered by the rules of indigestion. Again referring to the previous Cowgully one. All right. Continuing the food analogy, the Constitution of India defines indigestion or limits of freedom of speech to include threatening the security of the state, harming friendly relations with foreign states. Just give me a minute, I'll roll up the list here.
Sure.
Yeah, disrupting public order, violating decency or morality, showing contempt of court, defaming others, inciting offenses, challenging the sovereignty and integrity of India. And a lot of these, again, if you notice, a lot of these are again driven by the above seem to say that freedom of speech isn't really decided by the person speaking. It is the consumer of the content who decides whether the person who has spoken has been in line with what is allowed or not as per their framework. Right? What's decency, for example, or morality or incitement? Who owns these words? How are they defined? How are they decided or quantified? Here's an example I have. In the recent probably a year, we've had two specific entities in the world. One supporting Palestine,
Right.
one supporting Israel. Right? Is expressing support for either entity inciting something? Yes, it is. Depending on which side you take, the other side is always inciting offense. Right? So the other interesting point is that responsibility to adhere to freedom of speech norms is
Right.
largely a function of how visible you are, how popular you are, or what your reach is. As your popularity grows, your responsibility grows, not just proportionately, but exponentially also.
Okay.
The
So I'll
chances
hold that thought, because I'm going to come to that when we take up an example. I mean,
yes,
the example which really prompted this entire conversation and this podcast. So I'm going to come to the part where the who matters.
yeah.
But in terms of the concept itself, I mean, is there a response? I mean, are there responsibilities? So let's say you and I are having a conversation. We're having this conversation in a public space. We're not sitting in a drawing room and having a chat. Are there some responsibilities that come with the fact that there is a larger audience which is going to watch it?
Again,
So,
let's look at the three multiverses that I spoke about. Right,
right,
you're limited by those multiverses.
right,
Right, you have a responsibility to yourself to express. All right, and that is the first responsibility. The second responsibility you have is to the law and order framework of the state, which is the constitution. The constitution says you need to adhere to these norms. They may be loose, they may be tight, they may be whatever, we don't know. So for example, if I consider, for me, the only country that I consider as one that has taken freedom of speech to another level is the US of A, right, with the First Amendment to the Constitution. So they have nothing barred, right? They have hate speech allowed as part of freedom of expression. They have all these things allowed. I can openly go back and say, "Hi, I hate X, I hate Y, I hate Z," and you cannot be touched, prosecuted. Now, as countries happen, as cultures move ahead, as given our past, given whatever things, different countries adopt different frameworks. So in India, we have things like blasphemy, we have things like sedition, we have things like offense. We don't know what they mean, right? We really have. Here is blasphemy in a nutshell, given that we are a veritable cornucopia of religions and castes and cultures and creeds and languages, right? So there can't be a framework in India which says here is what blasphemy is about, here is what transgressions are about. We need to move case to case. So responsibility is largely a function of you being aware of your space and you being aware of the outcome of the conversation you are presenting, right? And largely, the chances of what you say coming back to bite you harder than a Mumbai ka machar are higher when you got name, fame, and glory more than others. So I may today get away with any kind of slander, any kind of whatever, as opposed to somebody who's immensely famous, as opposed to somebody who's a public figure.
understood. So, so let's come to the conversation that has prompted, I mean, the reason that has prompted this conversation. So, Ranveer Allahabadiya, and I'm happy to take the name here because I really admire that person for whatever he's achieved in a very short time. I don't say that you know Sanjeev about a lot of people, but he really achieved a lot for the world of podcasting in a very, very short while. Well, he made some inappropriate comments, on one of the shows where he was invited as a guest, and it sparked off, and the rest is history. You know what has happened, and we've all read what happened subsequently. So here I want you to delve on the issue that had this been somebody else, because I mean I've never watched that show before. India's Got Latent. I've not watched it. So, but people who watched it have told me, this kind of language is used very often on that show.
Mm.
And, and so far it has never had a controversy. But, it's become controversial, obviously, because of the person who said it. So can you now bring in this aspect of what you mentioned, to bring that context in?
Yes, but before I get the context in, now you must allow me a little bit of leeway.
Sure.
I want to set the context of the Allahabadia thing to understand what does freedom of expression cover. All right, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is permitted, what is an assumed journey, right?
All right.
FOE covers your right to ranting on WhatsApp groups, family, friends, business, blah, 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 right? It allows you to do public speaking from TED Talks to unsolicited gyan at chai stalls. It allows you to write, it allows you visual media, it allows you digital spaces, it covers song, theater, art, drama, dance, design, whatever you may look for. The most important thing that is born out of all these, by the way, and here is where I want to present the larger case for freedom of expression, is the right to information. Right to information would not have been born if the concept of freedom of expression did not exist. Right. So the Constitution brings to the table this specific right, the right to know before I opine. The Constitution also says not knowing and opining is also okay. All right.
Yeah.
Not knowing, not understanding, not whatever and opining is also okay. The right to shut up is also included in the concept of freedom of speech. You don't have to say anything. The right to shut up is also included. And I will present these layers in the Allahabadia story when we get down there. I wanted to lay the framework for the Allahabadia
Sure.
story, right?
Keep going.
And if you ask me about what justifies a nation, why does a nation have precious pages of the Constitution invested in something like freedom of speech? They are for the discovery of truth by open discussion, for an aspect of self-fulfillment. Now look at how these things work in tandem, okay? For an aspect of self-fulfillment and development, to express beliefs and political attitudes, to actively participate in a democracy. Now, each one of these in some way hits the other, contradicts the other, and creates a general mishmash. It's like a finely woven blanket. Fleas get in and out of those blankets, and so on and so forth. It is utopian, I agree. But nothing is ever point A to point B in this complex world that involves things like slander, insult, demeaning, faming, defaming, and all those things. Now, basis this, let's talk about the Allahabadia Kahani. We live in a nation called India. We are a bloody colorful country, an awesomely colorful country. And I'm not talking about dress, food, costume, culture, festivals, and so on. I'm talking about invectives also. I'm talking about invectives also. The kind of range of invectives we have in this nation will beat all other nations hollow. Uska ras, uska jo kehte hain, kya kehte hain uska, the flavors that come with each invective from each part of the land transcends anything that the West can throw at us. Abuse kaho, gali kaho, right? Let me know what part of India you can find people from who don't have an MCBC or an equivalent, right? There is no part of India doesn't exist of an MC or BC. Hindi mein hum bolte hain. And you know the best part? These invectives are in some place a part of a culture. They are terms of endearment at so many places. I've heard fathers calling sons an MC or a brother calling another brother a sibling BC. And that's the point I'm trying to understand. The way I see this is that he didn't say something that we haven't at one point or the other in our lives said or thought of as a word really. I don't understand why things went from LOL to FIR in seconds. I really don't understand this, right? It was all LOL, LOL, LOL all this while. And then it went to an FIR. What did he say that as a nation we haven't been saying for centuries, if I may use that expression? I do not know whether it existed 500 years back. I'm sure it would have. Somewhere, some chap somewhere must have, gone on all these invective journeys. Why did CMs of states step in? Right? Why was there news of parliamentary committees being proposed to study this, to analyze this, see what went wrong? Right? Why did bodies like NCW come in to step, and why was YouTube asked to take down that stuff? I mean, what happened really, right? I don't subscribe to invectives, but I know ones that are juicier than a bloody stale watermelon. And that's the whole point I'm making. Everyone does. I may not be wrong if I say that 4 out of 100 guys probably use such language in company. Okay, so there's talk that what he did was an insult to the award that the PM gave away to him as, the influencer, blah, blah, blah. There is talk that a guy who's talking so much about Sanatan Dharma should not resort to such words. Point remains that he just opened up in a show, which apparently was meant for roasting, a show that was designed to be fairly lenient with expressions used. Why did it become such a big issue? I still can't place my finger on. I mean, look at all these times when I've heard cricketers, all right, and I will not name them obviously, but you've heard those expressions from cricketers. Why did CEOs, public figures, think leaders who are roasting beer biceps, Ranveer Allahabadia now, for these words, not come up and say, I do not want to watch that game because that bugger is playing out in that game and he used these invectives, right? Why is this a point? You know, why can't these guys come back and say, hey, look, cricket is watched not by adults, cricket is watched by bacha log, yeah. They are watched by 5 years old, 6 years old. And do you think it makes sense for a cricketer to go up there, say MCDC so loudly that the cameras, that the mics trap it and stream it and send it across to millions of viewers? None of these guys actually step back and say, I want that guy out of the game. I want that guy out of BCCI or whatever else exists
Or
that
file
manages.
FIR. On
Yeah,
file
or
FIR.
file an FIR. Why were no FIRs filed out there? In my opinion, Ranveer offended, right? He did. But let me again come back to saying he offended a certain crowd. Like I said, there are consumers of offense. Offense is a consumer thing, right? And people who did not like the food he served got offended. Very simple. I know people who enjoyed that show. I know people who said, so what, bland tha, chalo aage nikalte hain. The question is, did he violate something? I'm not sure. I really am not sure, right? I have friends who study law. I have friends who practice law. They assure me that all courts that FIRs are filed at will not find merit in the case. I do not know how, why. Advocates themselves have filed an FIR at many places, which is again a fun thing for me because if an advocate says that this can be thrown out and the advocate who knows something files it, I think there is something weird happening out here, right? Also, the noise around this has started to die out. And probably you and I are the last guys on the planet talking about this anymore. So that's how short it really has been.
So I have a small theory on this. I mean,
Huh?
which we have discussed privately, but I'm happy to publicly talk about it. So I think uh, two things which he did, and maybe a combination of two things which he did, matter here. So one is the person himself. He's got an award, or
Yeah,
say calling him the disruptor. When you actually disrupt, you actually disrupt a lot of existing regime.
true
So
that.
one is that. So so when there's a disruptor who's made life miserable for a lot of people, there's always this thing that I want to get back to you. How
Yeah.
dare you, take in a position which I used to hold at some point in time. So I think
Let
one
me
is
come
that.
back. Let me come back with something specific, sir. Let me interrupt you. All right.
Yeah.
It took Arnab years to build this entire journey, and it took an Allahabadia a very short span of time compared to Arnab. I know what you're talking about. I know the feathers he's ruffled as a disruptor.
Sure. So that is one. So that is, I think, one point here. The second point, and maybe you can call me a little old-fashioned on this or whatever. So, I think the institution of parents, is something that a lot of people hold dear. Hear me out on this. Uh, you know, if you go out and criticize your parents, even publicly, a lot of people may still forgive you because they're your parents. But if you say something about somebody else's parents, even if those parents are the worst of the kind, the public will not forgive you saying, how dare you say something about somebody else's parent. I think this is a line which, in my view, he crossed. And that's where I think, the problem began. This is my personal view. I mean, you're free to debate
Yes,
it.
yes. I call these guys hypocrites.
So,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I call these guys hypocrites. At no
okay,
point have they ever stayed away from using an MC or a BC when they are with friends. All right. तो किसकी अपनी थोड़ी बात कर रहे हैं, दूसरे की बात कर रहे हैं. अभी दुनिया में किसी ने बता दिया किसी के बारे में, तो क्या हुआ ये ना? I mean, what is this worry that they really have is my question. What I mean, yes, he transgressed propriety, if the way we know propriety and public space and so on.
right.
But I'm sorry, this happens all the time. You don't want to watch something, you stay away from it, and that's also freedom of expression, right? We have been told by people, and this has come up in the past. You don't like something, you don't watch it. Movies में भी ऐसे हुआ है. There are guys who have come back and said, you don't like this movie, you don't watch it. It's as simple as that. Why do people go and suck that, uh, cavity that has just developed, and every time they suck it, they say, "Oh, my tooth is aching." It's as simple as that. Don't go there.
That's for the first one, the disruptive bit. So it's if you combine these two, it's a chain reaction. I mean,
Yeah,
sorry, it's a chemical reaction.
it's a chemical
In a chemical reaction, you need two chemicals. यहाँ पे chemical दोनों है ना. How dare you? How dare a guy who's 20-year-old or 25-year-old, challenge something that's been going on for the last 40
yeah,
years? That
true.
is one point of it. The second point of it was the content of what he said,
Hmm.
had it been only one of them, and which has been happening for a while now. The first one has been true now for the last 2, 3 years, and nothing happened. उसके साथ एक दूसरा chemical आया. The minute the second chemical came, I think, and I also suspect it's a little bit about promotion of the show. There are some people. I mean, had it been, let's say, Vipul Bondal or Sanjeev Sarma gone to that show and said the same thing, probably it wouldn't have been as controversial as Ranveer going, because they prefer to show that as the promo of what that show is going to be all about.
Yes, that one line I agree with you. A lot of people have told me, I have not heard of Ranveer Alabadia till this controversy happened.
Right.
Right. And I've now heard of him. So
Right.
I agree. I agree. I don't know whether it is a journey to promote the show. I do not know whether it is a journey to whatever. I will not get into that. That is left for him and his marketing guys to
It's not his.
figure
It's
out.
not his marketing. In the show, the show is not his. So so he is a guest on that show.
No. I understand.
Yeah.
I'm talking about his show. I do
His
not
show.
know whether it was a way for people to use him
Possible.
and say, here is the show that this guy runs. Why don't you watch it? There's a very
Correct.
easy way to boost, right? And that's a
Yeah.
pretty easy way. I am not talking
Oh.
about the India's Got Latent show. I'm talking about his show, right?
His show.
A lot of people who have not heard about him, and they know that such a lot of celebs have visited this gentleman's show. So if it works for him, it works for him.
In your experience, Sanjeev, how do you advise your client? Because there is always this thin line which can get crossed. There is this Lakshman Rekha that you're not supposed to cross. I mean, it's fine for us to have a discussion. It's fine for you to say that it's fine, or for me to say it's not fine. But somewhere that fine line is there, and things do get nasty, things do get dirty if the line gets crossed. So, how do you define this Lakshman Rekha?
Okay, let me express my view on this. That there really is no Lakshman Rekha. All right, a Lakshman Rekha is a shifting horizon. It's a gray world out there that everyone walks softly around, hoping that what you say doesn't offend someone and inspires someone. Because believe me, anything you say, and I will stick with this. Offense is not what I say. Offense is what somebody consumes. All right. So whatever I say is going to be an offense. This podcast of ours may be offensive. The topic may be offensive. My mustache may be offensive. Your attire may be offensive. Asking questions about a religion may offend. Keeping quiet may offend. Right. But here's something that someone who got bombed with slander cases told me. They said, imagine your words are a cricket ball. Hit boundaries, and worry only when you smash a window. Right? Worry only
That's
when you
very
smash.
interesting.
So the line is very simple. Speak your truth. Don't make it somebody else's nightmare. If you want to call somebody corrupt, it's probably fine. But calling somebody a thief would mean you have evidences on hand. So then it all boils down to that play of words that you really have, right? Which is where I come in from a content perspective and I say, can I call somebody corrupt? Yes, I can. Can I call somebody a thief? I can't. Because the concept of a thief resides somewhere within the legal framework. Corrupt का thought हो सकता है, corrupt का attitude हो सकता है, कुछ भी हो सकता है. But चोर चोर होता है. And till I have evidence, right? I can't call somebody a thief. So if your words need a lawyer before a like button, rethink them is my advice to everybody who writes out there. Right? If your words, and I repeat, if your words need a lawyer before somebody clicks on the like button, you need to rethink those words. So I'll give you the example of how the then finance minister Arun Jaitley had filed a 10 crore defamation suit against AAP leaders, right? They had made allegations of financial irregularities against him when he was president of the district Delhi and District Cricket Association.
Correct.
He was fine till they called him corrupt. He was fine till they called him juggler, ye, wo, sara kuch. But the moment they said financial irregularities in the DDCA, of which he was president from 1999 to 2013, without evidence, that was an accusation of impropriety against Jaitley. They had actually gone ahead and accused him of not being corrupt, but of specific corruption, right? And that is far more serious. Now they had to face that. They had no evidence. They had no proof. They had nothing to back up their statements. They're nothing except allegations. And that is when things move into a problem space, right? I mean, if here is my take about what this Ranveer Allahabadia had to go through, right? And I put it this way: if your joke needs a disclaimer longer than all those end of movie credits, don't make it. There is no other way to describe what happened to him.
That's true. I mean, I agree. Also, if you look at what happened, subsequently, police cases being filed. I believe there's a police case being filed in Assam. There's some 5 or 6 police cases here in Mumbai. The National Commission for Women has called in. There's some other body which is called in. I mean, it all comes across like a witch hunt, if you ask me honestly. And the funny part was in that case initially, most of the people who opined said that they haven't seen what he said. One, two, they say they don't know what who he is. So that's the second part. So they don't know who he is, and plus they haven't seen what they've done, but they still called him to testify in front of him and and given some ridiculous dates, 2 days later or something like that. I mean, it's not like it's we waged a war against the nation or something like that. I mean, definitely can wait if required. But it seems like it's more like a witch hunt. It's more intended to teach him a lesson and teach others a lesson. And mind you, the guy has apologized. For whatever it's worth, he tendered an apology. After that, also continuing. So, what's your take on this? I mean, do you think what I am saying
let's talk.
Making sense to you or not?
Let's talk about. You spoke about that Lakshman Rekha, right? Let me talk about what happens when you step over that imaginary Lakshman Rekha that most people say happens. Okay, there's just one short answer for what happens when you cross a Lakshman Rekha. No, there are two answers actually. If you're a nobody, then nothing happens.
Correct.
If you're a somebody, nothing good happens. All right, and these nothing good things are for me 3 buckets. First, a legal mess. It's probably the easiest worry to solve. Okay, FIR, court summon, and you go through a sudden urge to Google up how to apologize and mean it before you apologize in public space and are let off. So wo ho gaya. We've seen politicians do that. We've seen the AAP leaders do that in case of the defamation suit settlement in Jaitley's case and whatever. So I mentioned earlier the apology thing is easy. Most of the time it works. The second thing is what I call, and it's a far more serious problem, I call it the career Titanic moment. Right? This really is serious. Brands pull out, sponsors run away faster than Usain Bolt, and you suddenly discover that you have a lot more time to work on yourself after this journey. Right? It's a bad phase. It takes a lot of redoing and rebuilding to come back to the space you occupied. The third thing I call, which is a very, very tiny worry, but it can get under your skin, it's called the social media tandoor. Trolls, hashtags, memes about you that sting harder than your parents' disappointment about being better than Sharma ji ka ladka. Not a worry. These things get settled fast. These chaps move on from issue to issue, and nothing lasts forever, including November rain or Allahabadia problem. In his case, this man got a full-fledged reality check. One day he's everybody's favorite fitness bro. Next minute he's dodging FIRs like Neo dodging bullets in the Matrix. Right? All 3 things that I mentioned happened to him: legal mess, career Titanic moment, and the social media tandoor. Mostly he will not recover from this one. The celebs that flocked to his show because he was called a disruptor and given an award by our esteemed PM, they will stop coming to his show only because he let his guard down and dropped into an abyss of quote unquote crass content. Okay, content hai wo. Crass is, I put it in this because again, it's a subjective matter. All those guys who came because he was the recipient of an award will never come back to him. I don't know whether brands went to him, but if they did, then they won't. Brands don't want to touch controversy with a barge pole. Take the case of Salman Khan, take the case of Amir Khan. Salman Khan, had made this statement where, the exhaustion after a film shoot is equivalent to that of a woman being raped or something like that, right? And Amir Khan had come back and said, India is growing intolerant in the wake of those political controversies and so on, right? The brands moved away from them. And there was a point where, to a large extent, people had to say, Arey yaar, wo bol diya, abhi movie dekhna mat chodo, right? Acha movie bana hai. So utna had tak gaya. The second example I have of, what happens when you cross that line is that of MF Hussain. He had this very brilliant career. He actually was India's, answer to those Renaissance painters for a lot of people. Then he got into his own zone and started getting creative with his expressions. Of course, the
Correct.
country erupted, religious sentiments got hurt. Again, consumer. What he did right or wrong was the consumer. I hope you're getting me here, right?
Correct.
The
Correct.
country erupted, and this eruption, this large scale eruption, where such a lot of people got upset, made the courts take cognizance. He was summoned. उसके बाद क्या हुआ? He ran away to a foreign land. Nobody, really. He didn't come back any time after that at all, right? So here is the entire story of that Lakshman Rekha crossing. It happens. The impact is more for people who are more famous. With more fame comes more responsibility. अभी आप पूछ रहे थे थोड़ी देर पहले what is that responsibility thing, right? You are not responsible if you are nobody, but if you are a somebody, you are accountable and responsible both.
So I have two follow-up questions on this. So
Okay.
I'll start with one. So first is we've seen cancel culture. I mean, which you also alluded to. You don't like somebody, you don't watch the movie at all, or you don't invite them home, or disassociate your brand with it and so on. So that is that canceling that happens, or you know, so it always happens on both sides of the political divide, which we've seen. You know, one party doesn't go to a certain anchor show, and the other party doesn't go to the other anchor show. So
Yes.
these things happen. So that's one part of it. The other part is, corporates, putting, gag orders on things to be said and so on. So what's your take on this? I mean, where does this have to stop? Because end of the day, you can't have everybody saying politically good things about
No, I
everything.
disagree with this. I disagree with this. When we say
Okay.
we can't have, we are actually then going back and kicking freedom of expression on its teeth. I am saying if you hate something, it's okay, right? Tanishq went through this barrage. I do not know if you remember this ad they had launched, where a section of the population got upset because there was this Muslim guy and this Hindu women. Tanishq ad drew a lot of controversy. They had to, I don't know whether they withdrew it or not, but there was such a lot of flare up in it about social media. And just like they have a right to put out their thoughts, people also have a right to get offended because of the thoughts they put up, because they don't agree with that. And not agreeing is part of freedom of speech and expression also, right? So we can't say cancel culture should not exist. Cancel culture is a sign of health. It actually tells me that somebody is taking a stand very seriously, right or wrong, I don't care, right? But taking the stand is important. There will always be right people, there will always be wrong people, but taking a stand is what is important. I'm happy that people are doing that across all spaces that we see.
That's a different perspective. Okay, so I have my other question is now, Ranveer has got into this whole, right? So with your background of 35 years in the business and having seen ups and downs in people's reputations. So what do you think someone like him should do? I mean, he's undoubtedly a very talented guy. Uh, he made a mistake, he's apologized, he'll face whatever legal and other challenges that he's going to face. But what's the thing he needs to do to come back?
Okay,
If
I'll
he
sound
was
like
to
a
he was to ask you, what would you tell him?
I'll sound like a professor out here and a pretty
Okay,
pedantic one at that. Okay, we call it crisis management 101.
right.
When stuff like this happens, everybody has just one game to play and just a certain number of moves to make. 101 of crisis management, right? First, apologize faster than the guy who forgot his anniversary. He has already done this, right? Two, stop talking. Every word that you say after a crisis like this is potential fuel for fire. Just lie low till the dust settles down. I think this also has happened, right? Three, do something positive. Plant trees, donate to somebody, hug a stray dog and put up a pic or whatever, right? All these things, his PR agency or his marketing agency will figure out. Fourth, wait for the controversy to end. Social media has the attention span of a goldfish. Then come slowly back with a good firm that decides where you are seen, what you are seen for, and recover. Try and recover whatever ground you have lost. So personally, I have one more thing that I wish to share via your podcast. Right, this guy slipped. Ranveer Alabadia slipped. It happens. Right, he wasn't the first who, in a moment that we shall call ebullient or exuberant, slipped into a level of flippant statement that was seen as cringeworthy by a crowd. I say a crowd, okay, and possibly that is the crowd that matters or not. We don't know how he comes back. So probably the guys who are getting offended were never the guys who got, were consuming him. We don't know. Probably they got offended only because
Right.
this happened. So we have no idea of his demographics and his audiences or whatever. But if you look at such instances, there have been others, before him. There will be others after him also. And to everyone, I wish to say this, right? To avoid such problems, be Spartan with your content and, content style and tone. It is very important to do that. Now, if you quote such a controversy, make sure you're doing this on purpose, not as an accident. Because when you plan it on purpose, you plan the next 5 steps out ahead. Right? So if this is done with a purpose, like you mentioned, बहुत जनों ने अभी रणवीर अलाहाबादिया की कहानी सुन ली है. More people know about him. So if this was done with a purpose, he already has planned his next 10 steps. But if this has happened by accident, or to avoid this happening by accident, stick to your tone, develop a story, build a framework, stay within its norms. Right? You will not be consumed by the whole world, but nobody is consumed by the whole world. Right? There's only a certain audience that always gets attracted to you. I would recommend that you shun slipping into form, tone. Evolve into it. Don't just step into it because you get that moment of name, fame, and glory. Your followers will follow you everywhere, not just on your channel. They see you somewhere else, they'll say, oh, look, the guy I follow is here also. Right? So if you're going out there, let that tone that you've carried in your channel go there also. Because that's a way to establish your identity and keep your followers growing. Shun that need to that, people have this need, just अरे एक और बार blaze करता हूँ यार, let me do that one more thing and grow my audience, include वो होता है, it's fine. But problems like the one that happened to Beer Biceps happen at a moment where the need for blazing out into fame and glory right now kills the journey. I think it's a good idea to be wary of such moments. Everyone will have them. Don't give in to them. Or if you do give in to them, make a plan for it.
So, so for those who don't know, Sanjeev is also known as the old monk. Okay, yeah. So comes out also his company name is The Content Monks, and he calls himself the old monk. And that's why he's talking about beer biceps. So here's a bigger brother talking to a younger brother on what needs to be done. That was on a lighter note.
Yeah.
I don't mean to offend.
No worries.
Drink beer or anything. So,
no worries. You see where the toned down drink is, and you see where the froth is at, right? That's what I'm talking about. The beer froths.
So, okay, so let's move on to the topic of the community that we are talking, which is business networking. Yeah. You've been a business networker now for many, many years. So why don't you walk us through your own experience as a business networker? Why did you get into this? Why did you get into taxi? And what's been your journey so far?
Okay. So I think somewhere, I've been staying in touch with folks for 30 years, which means I've had more chai, biscuit, and monks meetings than I can count, All those meetings that I did for the sheer love of telling people what I do, who I am, getting to know who they are, what they do, seeing if I can work with them, seeing if they can contribute in some way to what I'm doing, I can contribute in some way to what they're doing. The world today calls business networking, right? So right from the time I was rookie to the behemoths of the IT industry who started NASCOM, and there I was under the able guidance of Ashank Desai, setting up events for these folks to network. We didn't call it networking at that time, right? Correct. But I've been at it. So I started with rookies like me of bosses like Ashank. So my first networking really happened there. तुम्हारी कंपनी में क्या हो रहा है, मेरे में ये हो रहा है, तुम्हारा पहचान का ये है क्या, मेरे पहचान का ये है क्या. All those journeys happened. And then when I started my own business called the Content Monk with the same, and I started meeting the same people to get, talking about me and projects for me and projects for them and whatever. So I've since then learned, I have sharpened my skills. I will not call it skills. I would say my journeys to meet people. I have worked on processes. I have worked because when you start meeting a whole lot of people, it becomes a problem staying in touch with a whole lot of people, right? So I have moved across, not just me, but I now have, I now work with people who are into travel and lifestyle, manufacturing, BFSI, legal, marketing, sales, across the spectrum, not just for helping businesses, but also for helping people, right? So things like what we used to call the old boys network. My old boys network today is because of networking. So today, if somebody I know needs an internship, I just call up the old boys network and I say, "Yaar, wahan pe chale jana, you'll probably get an assignment that you want." Or maybe somebody says, "Hey, I have a problem. Who do you think can solve this problem for me?" I know guys who've been through that problem and can give you 10 different steps to solve that problem, right? Maybe sharing best practices. And so networking largely is like playing chess with yourself. You need to be alive. You need to keep moving everything around and be active everywhere. That's when you really are good at networking, right? But just being around the board all the time. The players you may continue changing on the board, but you need to keep rolling those players back on the board and keep getting them back. And that's what probably networking is all about.
Fantastic. So this is a different explanation of networking which I've heard. Okay, so you also written a book on this. So why don't you
Yes,
talk
thank you.
about this book and this story?
Yes, so this book is a philosophy of mine. It's a summation of everything that I've done over the past X decades of my life. It's a culmination of all the business networking I've done. It's called Meet One New Person Every Day. And it's a philosophy I follow till date. So for me, networking is a philosophy and a way of life. It's not a set of tick mark activities. It's a way to do things that involve people, that involve growing a family of folks that I already know. So the book largely is an expression of that philosophy. It has all the tools, processes, stories that I've discovered to be a good expression of that philosophy. So think about it as a how-to guide for making connections without making it awkward. So whether you're a startup founder or somebody who wants to survive office politics or whatever, the book has stories enough to tell you how to overcome those, how to reach out, how to bond with people, how to connect with people. It also has a fair share of networking disasters, including why you should not hand over your visiting cards in a bathroom. So this is what the book is all about. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So, is it available on Amazon? I mean, where can somebody buy it if they
Oh
want
yeah,
to?
yeah, it's available. Just go and look for my name SANJW, or just look for Meet One New Person Every Day. It will take
Meet
you
one
to
person.
yeah, it will take you to the link, and yeah, you can pick it up from there.
And so we're coming to the end of the discussion as such. So what next for you, Olma?
Oh yes, so just around last Diwali, right? I thought how can I get books back into people's lives, right? And I it's a very unique problem. So what I did was I built what I like to call within my within the scope of what I know and what I've seen, the world's first ever crossword puzzle book dedicated to Hinduism. So 35 different topics on Hinduism, which includes our Devis and Devtas, our Rishis, ye, wo, dunya bhar ka, what the Vahanas are, what each of the deities stands for, what our ways to measure time and space. How did we measure time and space during our ancient, times? What are the Rishis and how have they contributed to the world today in so many ways. So it covers all these topics. Again, available on Flipkart and Amazon. So what happened was this book actually got the buzz going because it started moving out as a cultural gift. So people have gifted this away in Diwali boxes. There was a recent travel expo called OTM held in Mumbai at the Geo Convention Center. So a travel agent picked up 100 copies to gift it away to his foreign delegates, and so on and so forth. So I have arrived at the concept of how engaging, attractive, and worth consuming. Nobody wants to read; people want to engage. So I'm now moving to making print, paper, and everything engaging. And I think crosswords is a good journey for this entire thing. So that's the first thing. Second is probably something which a lot of people might call offensive, but I want to say it. I want to start a podcast around a phenomenon I'm seeing growing, right? I've seen Brahmins stepping into business over the past half a decade. I have not seen this phenomenon earlier. Brahmins were always earlier job करेंगे, salary लाएंगे, retire होएंगे, pension करेंगे, gratuity करेंगे, PPF करेंगे, बच्चे का शादी करवाएंगे. In the past 5 to 10 years, I've seen this community actually stepping up to entrepreneurship, and I'd like to do stories about that. Reason most of them are first-time entrepreneurs, right? And I would love to do those stories. So that excites me. The third thing that excites me, right, is giving India its own networking platform. So I call it the networking democracy. There's too many networking paradigms, process, journeys that exist. They are good, they're very good, but they're born in the West. And like IQ, the word IQ, I hate that word, right? It's something that's born out of the West. It is meant to denote Western superiority. And this word does not take in the pulse of localization, right? So what I want to build is networking as a cultural thing. So we were always networking. We had nais, we had priests who would go around, be pivots. I want to see whether I can develop those pivots for networking because our country expanse is so vast. I want to get these pivots together to drive all these businesses to meet each other and say hello to each other and see whether a market can develop between them. So this is the journey I have. Yeah, and of course, Every day shall be powered by the simple joy while meeting one new person every day.
Okay, super. So, okay, there's one question which has come on the community, and I really always ask the questions which come on the community. So, this question has come from Jean, and the
Sorry?
question from her, Jean,
Okay.
and her question is: should there be different speech rules for public figures? Interesting question. Should
Okay.
there be different speech rules for public?
Come again. What's the question? Should there be different
Should
speech
there be
rules?
different rules, speech rules for public figures?
Okay. So when you say you're a public figure, you're actually talking about name, fame, and popularity.
Yeah.
All right. The other word for popularity is notoriety. You
Right.
choose your rule accordingly. Yeah. You get immensely popular also by notoriety. Yes, there have to be rules. There have to be rules that decide where you're going as a public figure. Yeah, your public figure is you developing a persona for yourself, and all that you say, all that you do, all that you put together is should be focused towards the persona you're developing for yourself. Again, like I said, in the case of Allahabadia, and the advice I had for people: frame a policy, do a framework. That framework should be part of your persona, right? So you can be an offensive persona, you can be a calm persona, you can be whatever persona. But if you ask me whether there are rules, the rules are related to your persona.
Great. So
I
rules
hope
are
that.
related to your persona. So you figure out what you stand for as a public figure and be in alignment with it.
Yes, so
Okay,
there
there's
are
one more.
people. Sorry, there are
Go
people
ahead.
come back and say, 15 मिनट के लिए पुलिस को हटा दो फिर हम क्या करते हैं देखेंगे. It is part of their persona. They are not idiots to make this statement, right?
Yeah.
If they are building a persona out there, let's get this very clearly in mind. They are probably the most. They're smart, right? And they're just building a persona. So I hope that answers the question.
There's a question from Pratik which has come in. With his question, in your opinion, sir, has social media changed the way we understand and exercise free speech?
Okay, social media has given us a lot more scope for being part of the offense culture. I am offended. The first thing in social media is not, am I offending? The first thing in social media is, I am offended. And I'm happy about this. Yes, it has changed cultures. It has allowed us to express ourselves and tell the world what we are offended about. And I think it's a very important and a nice thing to happen. Again, I think I had said this earlier. There are two parts of communication. One is offending, the other is getting offended. All of us do both at the same time, right? And social media is very good for marketers to understand what you are offended about so that they can build the offense marketing journey for you.
So offense marketing is the new in thing. So
Oh, no, it's not the new in thing. It's been happening for
it's
ages,
been happening,
sir.
but you
No,
kind
it's been
of
happening.
conceptualized it very
Yeah.
nicely.
Thank
So
you.
on that note, thank you very much for your time, Sanjeev.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
We'll
Vipul.
obviously
I
have
trust.
all our private conversations over an old monk or maybe over beer. So one of these days, definitely. And
I don't have biceps. I'll stick with the beer. You get the
Okay.
biceps to the table.
Sure.
Cheers,
So
and thank you
much.
so much.
Bye. Bye.